Have you ever wanted to try something new, but you didn't quite have the confidence to take the plunge and put yourself out there? In today's episode, I'll be sharing one of the keys for how I went from growing up in poverty to becoming a successful doctor despite sometimes having feelings of self doubt. You will learn the one thing that keeps people stuck, and I'll also teach you my strategies to shift your mind and keep yourself moving forward. Welcome to the Creating Clarity podcast, where we talk about clearing the fog, shifting our focus, and uncovering opportunities that are hidden right in front of us. I'm your host, Dr. Liz Aguirre. Before I begin, I must emphasize that this work is separate from my professional medical work and does not represent medical advice or opinions of any specific organization. Hello and welcome, everybody. I have recorded a few podcast episodes now, and I keep changing my mind about which one I'm going to publish first. So this may or may not be the first episode when it comes out. I don't know. We'll just have to see. Today, I'm going to start off with a centering thought. If you're on my email list and you're receiving my newsletters, then you know how much I like centering thoughts. And as a side note, if you're not on my email list, then why not? I'll include the link in my show notes. And after you're done listening, you can go to my website and sign up. But back to the centering thought. A centering thought is simply a thought that I focus on when I'm feeling challenged. I find it incredibly helpful because it allows me to take my mind off of the negative. Today's centering thought is this: my messy middle has more power than perfection. My messy middle has more power than perfection. This is a really fitting thought because I had to adopt this centering thought when I decided to start this podcast. The messy middle is a term that I heard and I adopted, and it basically means taking imperfect action. It means that I'm going to mess up and I'm going to keep showing up anyway. And I won't always be at my best. And sometimes I'm going to be disappointed in my progress or my final results, but I'm going to keep showing up even if the results are a little messy. I'll be honest in saying that I had all kinds of perfectionistic ideas about what I needed to do before I could start this podcast. I have literally been considering this podcast for over a year, but I had so many limiting beliefs and thoughts that got in the way. And when I finally came full circle and realized, guess what? I don't have to be perfect. When I realized that, and I realized that I really just want to share my voice and my experiences to help other people, that's when this whole podcast actually start to become more clear in my mind and I was able to move forward. This podcast, it is designed to help us realize how our mindset impacts every aspect of our life. And that's part of the reason I titled it Creating Clarity. Because once we shift our mindset, things get a lot more clear. When I shifted the way I was thinking about this podcast, then the things that I needed to do to keep moving forward became a whole lot more clear for me. So, perfection is what stops so many people from taking action, including myself. And today, I'm reminding myself that it's okay to not be perfect. And I'm allowing you to see my messy middle and see what that looks like through this podcast. So, the first few episodes might be a little rough, and that's okay. Some episodes are going to sound and things are just going to flow beautifully and it's all going to come together. And others, not so much. I might fumble through an episode and I might be hoping that it just all came together and made sense for you, but that's okay. Even if it is my messy middle and things are a little fumbled sometimes, I am positive that even my messy middle will resonate with someone who is listening. Someone who is listening to this today needs to hear what I'm sharing exactly the way I'm sharing it, without all the polish, without the perfection, without the perfect little skit to read off of. Exactly the way it appears today is what someone is needing. So, if you're that someone that is listening today and you're feeling a little stuck, and this episode pops up on your queue, it might be the little nudge that you're needing. I challenge really every single one of you who's listening to join me in showing your messy middle. It's really a liberating feeling. Perfection in my mind is something that's not real at all. It somehow implies that we're superhuman, and of course, we're not. Perfection implies that we have to live up to a sometimes unrealistic expectation. And another crazy thing about perfection is that my idea of perfection is not going to be the same as your idea of perfection and vice versa. It's all relative. And the fact that these ideas of perfection are what paralyzes us is crazy because there is no perfect. So here are the problems with perfection as I've identified. Number one, they keep us from taking action. Number two, they cause us to spend more time than is really necessary to accomplish something. Number three, we're almost never happy with the results when perfection is the goal. Number four, it creates unnecessary frustration. And number five, it will make you feel like you're not good enough. And I have felt that so many times that I felt like something I've produced or something I made is just not good enough. And it's not true. That's just a limiting belief. So I want you to think of your life right now and think about the things that you're wanting to accomplish and where you're wanting to go into your life, and ask yourself if you're not moving forward because of fear. Ask yourself if you're setting some kind of crazy expectation on yourself and that's what's keeping you from moving forward. Challenge yourself. Ask yourself, are those thoughts really true or they're just limiting beliefs? When we learn to embrace that messy middle, that's when the magic really starts to happen. That's when things get clear and you start to see the things right in front of you. I don't want my perfection or my perfectionistic ideas to stop me from taking action. We can spend so much time tweaking things to death and them still not be perfect. So, what do I do? What are the other things that I do that help me take action when I'm starting to get stuck in that perfection? I realize that many of you already know or already have the awareness that perfection is preventing you from taking action. The real question is, how do you get past that? Well, here's a few things that I do. Number one, I try to find a centering thought that's believable to me. For today, my centering thought was my messy middle has more power than perfection. And that makes sense to me. It's believable to me. The next thing I do is I remind myself of my strengths. I'm a good speaker. I've overcome a lot of struggles and I have a lot of knowledge that's worth sharing. I've spent over 10 years of my life learning how to become successful and figuring out how to move forward. And a lot of people have told me that my words have actually profoundly helped them in some way. So I have to go back and I remind myself that those are all strengths. Those are all things that are helpful to share with other people. Another thing I do, da da da, are you ready for this? Drum roll, sticky notes. I literally have sticky notes everywhere in my house. If you look on my shelf, on my wall, on my desk, on my computer, in my bathroom, on my mirror, in my closet, in my bedroom, I literally have sticky notes everywhere in this house. And every time I hear something that resonates with me, I write it on a sticky note and I stick it up on the wall. I write those down so that when my brain is trying to pull me back and is offering me limiting beliefs, I go back and read my sticky notes. Here's a few that I have up on my wall. I'm just going to look up and read these to you. Be okay with your messy middle. That sticky note, I was sitting here kind of stuck and I was trying to think about what my next podcast episode was going to be. And I looked up and I read that and I was like, that's an episode all by itself. So be okay with a messy middle. Baby steps are what starts momentum and keeps showing up. Those are some of my favorite sticky notes, but literally I have probably about 50 different sticky notes up. The next thing is I remind myself that fears are normal and they're going to come anytime I step outside of my comfort zone. Fears will come. And during that time, I just have to remind myself that's okay. The fears are expected. I expected that. And even though I know that, I'm telling you, I often forget it. I have probably about 5 different sticky notes that remind me of this one point. Remind yourself, fears are normal. Don't let them get in your way. Because guess what? Even after you get past that one fear, another one's going to come right back at you. Your brain is always going to offer you the path that is easiest and the most comfortable. And that's always going to be the path you've already experienced. That's where your comfort zone is. You already know what to expect. But the only way you can get to the next level and accomplish new goals, the only way you can do that is to move outside of your comfort zone and face those fears. So, fears are normal. Anytime you're experiencing fear, remind yourself that just means you're growing. Another thing that I do when I'm stuck in taking that perfect action is I remind myself that people are not going to like me, and that's okay. A lot of times we get stuck and we don't move forward because we're really worried about what other people think, right? What if people think I'm dumb? What if people think I don't know what I'm talking about? Or what if I embarrass myself? This point is worth writing on a sticky note and sticking it up on the wall. There are a lot of people who won't like me. That's okay. Ask yourself, does it really matter? Do I need everyone to agree with me? No, absolutely not. I actually don't need anybody to agree with me. I'm really here just to share my experience because I know it's going to help someone. But if it doesn't resonate with you, then that's okay. Let me give an example. Actually, I was thinking about this. I have a really good example. Taylor Swift. I love Taylor Swift, but there are literally so many people who despise her. Think about what happened to her during an award show. She was actually up on stage receiving an award, which means so many people loved her and thought her work was amazing that she was nominated and received an award. And then she got up on stage, and someone literally ran up on stage and took her trophy away and said that she didn't deserve it and somebody else deserved it more. Right? That's like the most humiliating thing that could happen. My point being that literally millions of people will say, wow, look how much she has accomplished in her young life. Wow, look at everything that she's done. Wow, look at how talented she is. And yet there are millions of other people who think exactly the opposite and think that she is terrible. For every person who thinks that Taylor Swift is amazing and accomplished, there are millions of others who disagree. So if you're waiting for everybody to agree with you, or if you're waiting to get validation from other people, if that's what's paralyzing you, you might just need to take a step back and take a reality check. Accept that people who see you or hear your work are just not going to like you sometimes. They're not going to agree with you, and that's okay. They're not your people. But the people who need you, the people who need your product or need your service or need your help, those people, they're going to find you. So whether you get good feedback or you get bad feedback, it doesn't matter. With that said, I do think it's important to reflect on the feedback that you get and see if there's anything that can be learned. I mean, someone has actually given me their free feedback without me having to send out a survey and ask them what they think. So, what can I take from that to improve? Anytime you hear something that goes against you, it's really going to sting a little bit. Our egos are going to be activated. We're not going to like the way it feels. It's going to make us feel uncomfortable. And all of that is okay, but don't let it stop you. Identify what your learning opportunity is, identify how it might help you improve, and just keep going. It's important to realize that that feedback is just that person's opinion. And it literally can have nothing to do with me. Literally nothing, zero. They might have a completely skewed perspective because of an experience that they've encountered. And I'll talk about that in future episodes. I full heartedly believe that the way we think and our beliefs are based on our experiences that we've had in our life. That feedback could have nothing to do with me. So I don't need everybody to approve of what I'm saying. The last thing I'll say is recognize when limiting beliefs are holding you back. Again, I'll do a whole episode about that, so I won't get into it right now, but just recognize that your mind can say things that are just not true. So, to summarize, to wrap it all up, I just want you to recognize that perfection is really not necessary and that the messy middle is okay. The things that have helped me to embrace that and to believe it are to find centering thoughts that are believable, to remind myself of the strengths that I have, reference my sticky notes with the positive thoughts to feed my brain, remind myself that those fears are going to come and they're expected, and be okay with people not liking me or not liking something about me or something I said. It's okay. And recognize when the limiting beliefs are holding me back. I was actually reflecting on how long it took me to become a doctor, simply because I spent a lot of time hiding. I was changing majors and I was questioning whether I could go to medical school. And I finally came to the realization that I didn't have to be a perfect student to get in. I did not have the perfect grades. And finally, I applied to medical school and I got in. And guess what? After I got in, my fears got even stronger. I was so afraid that my classmates would find out that I wasn't near as smart as them, and I was so worried about that. And after I graduated from medical school, it literally took me like 6 months before I was comfortable introducing myself to my patients as a doctor because I felt like a fraud. We are constantly comparing ourselves to others as a measure of ourselves. And we shouldn't do that. We should be focusing on us and our strengths and moving forward, not comparing. The reality is that we are perfect just the way we are. What we view as a weakness, others might view as a strength. And what looks like a messy middle to me might appear as a masterpiece to somebody else. This podcast is going to have so many imperfections, and I'm okay with that. I want you to see me, The real me that's not always polished and not always perfect. Good enough is going to be good enough much of the time. That's it for today, everybody. I truly hope that you found this podcast helpful. And if you did, please take time to leave me a 5-star review and share it with a friend. I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit subscribe so that you won't miss the next episode. And if you like this episode, please share it with a friend and give me a 5-star review so that I can reach more people. I'll see you next week.
Disclaimer. The views and opinions shared here are for information and educational purposes only. They do not serve as a medical or professional advice. They do not represent any academic, medical, or professional institution or organization. If you found this helpful, don't forget to leave a 5-star review.
Thank you.